Hi there, my name's Annette. Sunbeam Fabric Art is my channel and I want to welcome you. This introduction may run a little long, so I'll leave some bookmarks in this video so you can skip the introduction if it's too long for you and you can just skip ahead to the action. Anyway, let me tell you about this quilt. So not too long ago, a friend and I were up in a town called Weston, Missouri, and that's in the northwest part of Missouri in the United States. And we stumbled upon a basket of really rough quilt block scraps. And someone had laundered these quilt blocks in the washing machine, in the dryer. The backs of these quilt blocks were in bad shape. They were, the thread was all bundled up into knots and nests. It was really bad, and many of the blocks are and were stained. Many of them have holes. Some of the holes, there's just too many to patch. But the ones that weren't too bad, I went ahead and patched, or I'm going to patch those. Anyway, you know, sometimes when I find something at an estate sale or a garage sale or a thrift shop, sometimes I get a feeling about it, and this basket of quilt blocks, I actually got a feeling about it that it was good. I just had a good feeling about it. I didn't really look through the basket very closely. I just got the feeling that I should get this basket. It was $35 for the entire basket. So I got it, took it home, and immediately started looking at it, working on it. I looked up the blocks in my encyclopedia to see if I could identify any of the blocks, and I'll go through many of the blocks that I was able to identify. After going through my encyclopedia block by block and trying to find out what these blocks were supposed to be, or when, maybe when the block was first in print, I think this is a 1930s era, or that's what I came to imagine, that this was a 1930s era quilt block or quilt attempt or some kind of sampler quilt that was going to be made. After I finished putting this quilt together, which I'll show you that whole process, but after I finished putting this quilt together, I reached out to the place where I got these quilt blocks. It was a charity, and the only thing they could tell me was that when this basket came in, the lady who brought it in said she was cleaning out her grandmother's farmhouse. So as a lot of people who are not quilters know, you know, when you inherit something like that, you just don't know what to do with it. You're not sure, but you try to find somewhere that someone can use it. I had a similar experience when my mom passed away. My dad, my sister and I had to clean out their house, and my mom had a lot of things that she had wanted to do but was not able to finish or complete. So that was tough, and I mean, I guess I can feel for that granddaughter having to clean out that farmhouse and not knowing what to do with these quilt blocks, or if they were even worth anything. One of the things I found the most endearing about these quilt blocks, though, even though they have all been laundered or had been laundered before I got them, there are pencil marks that are probably 100, maybe 90 years old. These, the lady, or I'm assuming it's a lady, it looks like feminine handwriting, wrote the names of these blocks on the blocks themselves. Now, I'm sure some of them have washed out, but there are many of them that did not wash out, and many of them have spelling mistakes. And the reason that is endearing to me is because my mom, who was born in the 30s, could not spell very well. She really insisted that my sister and I get a good education and learn how to read and spell. She never was very good at it. She tried, but there are a few spelling errors on these quilt blocks that are very endearing to me personally. So over the course of the next, after I obtained these, about the course of the next week or two, I cut the blocks down to sizes that matched. Many of them did match each other, but there were some giant blocks, one that was, I think, 14 inches. Then there were other blocks that were between 10.5 inches and maybe 12.5 inches. They just varied a lot. There was a whole nother set of blocks that were maybe 8.5 inches unfinished, and There were also some very small ones that were, oh shoot, I think they were six or so. And I also wanted to mention there were many blocks that were half finished. So for example, there was a half of a hexagon block, a completed hexagon block, but it was only half. Or there was a triangular shaped block started that was going to grow. There were other blocks that were almost like a half square triangle where you cut it in half, and maybe the other half is going to be something else, but the other half wasn't there, so they were just missing. But to honor this quilt maker and make these blocks into something that is going to be a treasure someday, it's a treasure for me now. I love it. But I wanted to just join it all together into one project. I didn't want to divide it up. I felt like that basket of blocks needed to stay together. So that's what I did. And I'm going to take you along on that little journey and show you what I did.
I took this video in the shop before I decided to buy the basket. I flipped through and I filmed it just in case. I thought even if I didn't buy it, someone might find this video interesting. The basket did come home with me. It took me about 20 minutes just to go through the basket, and you can see some of these pieces are in bad shape. But I determined to kind of sort them out by size and save the parts and pieces that could be saved. If you really are interested in seeing me unload this entire basket of blocks one by one, I'm going to leave that at the very end of this video as a bonus for anyone who wants to watch it. It took me about 20 minutes to go through the entire basket, and I did sort them out into sizes as I went along. But just from this little glimpse of the basket, you can see some of these pieces are in such terrible, terrible condition. But I was able to save most of what you see in this basket. Once I had everything sorted out by size, I put it all back into the basket and I put the smallest pieces on the bottom. I decided I would start with the large pieces first. There seemed to be quite a number of completed square blocks that were at least 10.5 inches, so I thought that would be the good place to start, just getting these big pieces together. Well, let's take a look at some of the blocks. I did find this one in Barbara Brackman's encyclopedia. It's listed as unnamed. The maker wrote bird's nest. This one was in the encyclopedia as double T or cut the corners. I did not find this exact block, but I think it would be fun to remake it with that 9 patch in the middle. The maker called this block Pigeon. I did find it in the encyclopedia listed as hovering hawks. This one is called Palm Leaf, and I did find it in the encyclopedia. This block is called Nautilus in the encyclopedia. I found this block in the encyclopedia listed as honeybee. This block was listed as arrowhead. Of course, we had to have a shoe fly block, and then my favorite spelling mistake is shell chain. Let's get started sewing these blocks together. To start with, I took a few blocks that were the same size and just stitched them together. I continued chain piecing blocks together. When I got to the end of one size, I just kept moving on to the next size. Some of the blocks were not square, and I wanted to preserve the block as much as possible, so I did stitch on some white fabric around the outside of this particular block just to complete it, to make it a square. Then I also like this block so much, I put some decorative embroidery stitches on top of the black fabric. That was just my own little artistic addition. And I slowed this little section down because I ran across another block that I wanted to add an outside onto to make it squared up so I could fit it in. Once I separated all those chains, I started stitching these blocks together into rows. Eventually, I had to deal with these odd-shaped blocks. So some of them I was able to put together to make squares. Others I had to add additional fabric. Some I cut apart and put it back together a different way to make it square. Some of the block pieces had one side that was complete rags, but the other side was usable. So here you see I am trying to get these bits and pieces to a size that matches other pieces. Next, I dealt with these small size blocks. Most of them were square, some of them were rectangle, some of them had muslin backing where they had been top stitched down. I do believe that every single block in this basket was hand stitched. It's also pretty obvious that some of the fabric had been clothing fabric, and I even found one heavy, almost like an upholstery fabric in one of the pink blocks. I had enough of these small-sized blocks to make almost an entire row. And I used other bits and pieces of the small size to finish up rows that were not quite matching other rows. I wanted to show you an example of some of the bits and pieces that were just a little too far gone to use. I am going to use scraps of this fabric though for patching on holes that are a little bit smaller on the quilt when I'm done. Once I had my rows mostly the same length, I started putting 2 rows together, and these quilt blocks are all over the place as far as size, so I was not trying to match seams or do anything. I'm just trying to put these rows together to get them joined up. You might have noticed a lot of these blocks have seams that are coming together in a point, many seams all in one place. I did have to use a heavy-duty needle to stitch this, otherwise my thread kept breaking on me. One thing I did that was very helpful was once I got a row done, or even 2 rows put together, I would make some straight edges for myself. This made it a lot easier to join to the next row. For rows that ended up just a little bit longer than the next row, I just trimmed off the excess and saved that to use later. I kept straightening the edges and joining more and more rows together. After putting the last 2 large pieces together, all I had left to do was to trim off the edges and make them straight. And here is a look at this finished quilt top. I am going to be quilting it myself, probably at home on my domestic machine, so that will be an adventure. It's rather heavy. I'll put the measurements of this quilt top in the description of the video. I want to thank you for joining me today for this long video that is super fun. I have enjoyed it so much. And as I promised, at the very end of this video, I'll do that bonus if you want to watch me unload that entire basket and see each and every quilt block as it came to me. I'll put that at the very end. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope to see you back again real soon.